Hello, EcoFarm 2025. Woo! So amazing to be here with all of you tonight. January 22nd, happy Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Yes, yes. I was also just hearing about some celestial things that are happening in the sky that we might hear about later in the panel. You know, it's been a year since some of us have seen each other. It does feel pretty amazing to have this reunion happening annually. And I joined, my name is Rebecca North, by the way. I'm the executive director at EcoFarm now. And just so honored to be here, and so honored to be in this room. You know, Gabrielle Salazar, who used to be the program director here, Gabby said yesterday, as we were all running around like bees since Monday, setting all of this up, staff and I, and she said, what you all are doing is a gift to the community. And it does feel like that, and I'm so grateful to have you all here. And it does feel important to convene, and it feels like the work that we're all doing together, and everybody belongs everywhere here at EcoFarm. And I'm just really honored to be part of this. And so Michael Ackley-Grady is going to come up and do some housekeeping announcements, such as don't sleep in your car. And then we're going to have other parts of the programming as well. Thank you all so much for being here.
Good evening. My name is Michael Ackley-Grady, and I have the honor and privilege to be on the board of EcoFarm. So tonight I'm going to share with you some of our housekeeping. Please wear your conference name badges at all times. We will also be checking IDs at all events serving alcohol. Immediately following tonight's keynote session, there will be warm herbal tea donated by Mountain Rose Herbs and chocolate donated by Dr. Bronner's. Enjoy. Say hello to new and old friends, and get some rest for a fun few days ahead. Help us make EcoFarm a zero-waste event. Please use the recycling and compost bins placed around the conference grounds. All containers, plates, coffee cups, and utensils offered in the kitchen and by our vendors are compostable. Get your organic cotton conference and dirt first t-shirts, hats available in the surf and sand. We also have a silent auction items this year. Water stations are available around the campus thanks to U.S. Pure Water. For meal times, please refer to the schedule in your program booklet and not the hours printed on your Asilomar meal tickets. If you are not registered for lodging on the Asilomar conference grounds, please use street parking. Watch out for those no parking signs and to make sure to not get a parking ticket. There are heavy fines for parking in the fire lanes. Again, there is no sleeping in your cars or vans on Asilomar grounds, and all state park rules are enforced. Who participated in the bus tour and pre-conferences? Hope you all had a great day. Raise your hands if you filled out your survey. So some more of you, I feel like, should be getting those hands up. Please fill out your surveys after every workshop. QR codes and paper options are available. Download the Mighty Networks app to access the complete and up-to-date schedule of EcoFarm workshops and special events. Create your own customizable conference schedule and find workshop locations, connect with other attendees, and more. Find the Mighty Networks app on your smartphone app store. And lastly, EcoFarm seeks to create a community and a culture that is respectful, open, curious, and kind. Please join us in these agreements to create a good experience for all. Thank you. And then, yeah, Albert Strauss, do you want to come up next?
Hi, everybody. I'm Albert Strauss. I founded Strauss Family Creamery. I just asked to have a minute to talk to you guys about what's happening in our community. We were the first organic dairy farm west of the Mississippi River, and now 90% of the dairies in Marin and Sonoma County are certified organic, producing half the organic milk in California. We developed a carbon-neutral organic dairy farm model that's being recognized by the UN as a model for the world. At the same time, we just had an announcement that the National Park Service, in collaboration with the Nature Conservancy and our Congressman Huffman, have evicted 6 organic dairies and 6 cattle ranchers and 90 ag workers, mainly Hispanic workers, from Point Reyes National Seashore. And it's devastating our community. And so I'm asking for your help to write letters, call, and make our congressmen and our government aware that this is not acceptable. And we're trying to create a working landscape that is producing high-quality organic food and taking care of the environment at the same time. And so we've shown that we can do this, and we need everybody working together to make this happen. So thank you for listening to me, and thank you for any support you guys can give.
Mishmin Tuhis, Conracat Canyon, Coyote Woman, Sayers Roots. I'd like you to repeat a few words with me. Can I hear you say Rumsin? Rumsin. Can I hear you say Esalen? Esalen. And I come from the Mutsun Ohlone territory, a tiny bit north of here. In my language, can you say Ama Pidit Takawas? Ama Pidit Takawas. You are acknowledged the first words, first names, and first languages of this land. Right here, right now, we are in Rumsian Ohlone territory. And parts of Monterey County also are Esalen territory. And there are more than 5 Rumsian tribal communities. So there isn't just one Rumsian tribe, one group of Ohlone. Ohlone territory spans from San Francisco to Monterey Bay, and I'm just one tribal chairperson from one tribal community from Indian Canyon. And as a local representative of my community and my culture, it's really important that we acknowledge the histories of these spaces and places that we occupy. And when we think about it, when you honor your elders, your ancestors, we all have indigenous lineages from the land that we come from. However, how are we being good guests? How are we being good visitors if we are not on the land that our ancestors have always come from and been from? We are all community together, so we need to think about how we are good ancestors in training. And part of that is what my mother and my grandmother have always taught me. When song, ceremony, and dancing stops, so does the earth. So even if you can't commodify your 2 left feet and you don't feel like you have rhythm, even if you feel as though you have a tone-deaf voice, don't stop singing in the shower or at car karaoke. And when we are in unity, when we are aligned, when we go to those special spaces, even if it's in nature, or we go to the various spaces our communities go to pray, when ceremony stops, so does the earth. And I want to offer a song in a good way. In my language, humunya is hummingbird. Can you say humunya? Humunya. And here in Rumsian Ohlone territory, it's humaya. Can you say humaya? I am a Two-Spirit indigenous culture bearer, and hummingbirds are known as the flying gems. And the Spaniards called our Two-Spirit community members Hoyas. And I see that correlation, and so hummingbird brought fire to the people, and hummingbird brought life to the first humans. The plants and the animals are the first people, so I want to honor hummingbird. And it's a really soft, subtle song that once you start learning the lyrics, you can hum along, you can sing along, or we actually have traditional drums that are stomp drums. So you are welcome to go with the beat to help that rhythm continue. So I'm just gonna offer this hummingbird song. Humunya, 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 weha, weha. Humunya, 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 weha, weha, ho. 4 times. Humunya, 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 weha, weha. Humunya, 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 weha, simple, right? Humunya, 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 weha, weha. Humunya, 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 weha, weha, ho. Humunya, 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 weha, weha. Humunya, 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 weha, weha, ho. Oh, and a good oh, oh. We say oh to send those prayers out there in a good way. We are still here, so welcome to Rumsey and Ohlone territory. I am honored to share space with you, and may we all attempt to be good ancestors in training going forward and taking care of the earth. Oh!
Good evening. Welcome to 45th edition of the Ecological Farming Conference. I'm a farmer emeritus from T&D Willie Farms, and I'm here to curate a conversation about the past and the present and the future of this wonderful gathering, tribal gathering and community that has been meeting ever since 1981, as you can see up here. And most organizations like this, and even married couples, don't do a whole hoopla about their history until the 50th anniversary, the golden anniversary, right? But the three of us who are on the kind of in our older years up here are a little concerned that you all might think we might be pushing up daisies before another 5 years. Or if not that we'll have a bad case of CRS. Can't remember shit. So they decided they better get us up here on year 45. So we'll let go of the elder abuse idea and we'll do it. And we've got a couple of younger eco-farmers up here with us, and so we'll get it going. But just before that, I just want to say, and one of us up here, who you will find out soon, was at the original EcoFarm at the Winters Firehouse in 1981. And I myself have been to at least 40 of these in a row without fail, and my wife, Dinesh, has been to most of those as well. Is there anyone out here in the audience that did attend the first EcoFarm at 1981? No, you did. Is that Harlan Myers? Okay. How about anybody who was at an EcoFarm in the 1980s? Stand up, please. You got quite a few of those, So you all may have read the official biographies of the folks sitting up here with me, my guests, and I'm not going to repeat that kind of stuff. We don't need to. You all can read. But I am going to invite each of them to ground themselves in the soil. And so I'm going to ask, and I'll start with Miguel since you're down on the end there. Are you a native Californian? And if not, where is the soil from which you sprang? And secondly, were you born into a farm family? And if you weren't, how far back do we go in your family history to find people who were making their living by working the land?
Well, thank you very much for the invitation. I was in the Winters, California, 1981 EcoFarm, and I'm originally from Chile. And I came, I didn't have any ancestors that were farmers that I can think of. Actually, my father was an immigrant from Italy, from Napoli, came to Chile back in early 1940s. And then circumstances of life, there was a military coup in Chile. I left Chile like many other thousands. And I ended up in Colombia, where I was exposed to, I was studying agronomy in Chile, which is interesting because in Chile, most of the professors that taught us in agronomy studied at Davis. So when I came to California, I understood that I had been trained in California agriculture. But before that, I was lucky because I ended up in Colombia, and for the first time I was exposed to traditional farming systems, diversified agroforestry systems, intercropping systems, and that basically made me understand that my formation as agronomist was totally inadequate to understand the complexity of the systems, and very soon I understood that that was the key to promote a more diversified, resilient farming system. So I don't have a history of a family history of farming, but I was lucky that I was exposed to that. And then even more lucky when I was hired as an assistant professor exactly at the end of 1980 in the Division of Biological Control, which was a group of scientists at Berkeley who actually started biological control in the late 1800s. I don't know if you know this, but in the late 1800s, they introduced the Rhodolia beetle to control the cotton cushion scale that was decimating the citrus industry. And from then on, this group set the foundation for many of the things that we're talking about here. And we have to honor that legacy. Unfortunately, that group was closed down by Berkeley because obviously we saved California $2 billion in pesticides without accounting for the benefits, the environmental and social and public health benefits.
That's why you got shut down.
Yeah, that's why you got shut down.
And that's why the pesticide mafia, which actually Professor Robert van der Bosch, who was one of the members of this group, wrote a book called The Pesticide Conspiracy, which I think you need to read because it tells the history. And then the pesticide mafia didn't close the division, the biotechnology companies did. And unfortunately, we lost an incredible public good, you know. And I see now that the university and other people are trying to rebuild these things that already existed in the past. And so it's very important to understand the legacy that this group left, because when I was listening this morning in the session on pest management, all this stuff was being discussed at that time. And so that's kind of my story.
So Drew, are you are you a native Californian, and were you born into a farm family? And if not, how far back do we go to find people who made their living on the land in your clan?
I am not a native Californian. I grew up in the most beautiful state of Vermont. I don't know if there's any other Vermonters here. And it's pretty darn hard to make a living in Vermont farming, and that's why I'm here now. But my family, my mom and dad grew up in the Northeast Kingdom in Vermont. Very hard scrabble, very cold, but we always had, as most Vermonters do, huge vegetable garden, and we weren't actual farmers, but my dad was an amazing gardener, and I remember growing spinach and sweet corn as a youngster, so as far back, I don't know how far I would have to go back to really find people who were making a living, but they were definitely making their dinner all the time from a garden, yeah.
Canuck, shall I repeat the questions, or?
No, I think I.
Oh, you got the gist. Okay.
All right, so for me, born and raised in Sacramento, California. Shout out to Sacramentans that are here. And for me, it's 4 generations on both sides. My dad's side from Waco, Texas, and my mom's side from 96, South Carolina, which I got a chance to go back to 96 and go and tour the old graves where they had some of my ancestors there. But they both came out here via the Great Migration, leaving the South. First, my dad, their family went to the Bay Area, and then from the Bay Area, they came to Sacramento. But what I distinctly remember with my father is he still had it in him because he would keep gardens. Of course, I wasn't paying any attention to any of these things at the time, but he kept gardens. I have pictures of him with these tomatoes that are like the size of both of his hands, and he's looking so happy with these tomatoes. He also used to do this crazy thing, which I didn't like. He would stop at these empty lots that were growing wild greens, and he would take a bag and he would, go out and start picking these greens. And, he did this in our neighborhood, and I was like, Dad, what are you doing? I'm like, my friends are gonna see us picking greens,
You were probably embarrassed, right?
I was embarrassed. I was like, why can't we just go to the grocery store? That's all. Only poor people would
Like
go
normal
and
people,
pick
right?
wild greens out of an empty lot. But no, but seriously though, so 4 generations back, I have family that were farmers, landowning farmers in those areas. So that's a little bit about me in that particular sense.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sarah, you're next.
Funny enough is I was born in California. I was born in Los Angeles area. So, and that's where I was raised till I was 10. And
We were neighbors.
Yes. And I still have family there and go there quite often. But my parents moved to Utah, and that is where I farm. So I'm not a California farmer, but I was born in California. And generations back, let's see, my grandpa was born and raised on a farm, but he left the farm for Hollywood. And so,
Him and a bunch of other people,
yeah,
right?
after World War II, he got out of the Army and did not want to
Where was his farm? Where did he farm?
He was in New York.
New York State.
Yep, New York. That's where they had in Poughkeepsie area. And then my grandma was born on a dairy farm, his wife, and she wanted nothing to do with that either. So they both came to Hollywood. And that's where, and now I've come back and brought my parents back.
Did they become movie stars then?
No, they did not.
So why did your family leave Southern California for Utah?
Because they didn't want to raise another child in Los Angeles. And so they got a farmer out of it. So I think it might have been a good choice. So.
So I'm going to let the cat out of the bag up here. Miguel is the one person on the stage that attended the original EcoFarm in 1981. We're going to ask you to tell us a little bit about it. But because there's another person in the audience who was there, you have to tell the truth or she's going to wrap. So tell us something about the original EcoFarm gathering, and particularly what is the mission that you all embraced? And how many people were there? Just a handful? Or?
Well, I remember it was a fire station in winters, and I don't remember the number of people, but maybe 60 people. Obviously, Amigo Bob.
60?
60
Oh,
people
that's
at least, I think.
have to
Somebody can correct me. Amigo Bob was one of the key organizers, obviously.
Amigo Bob and Martin Barnes. It's down here.
Yeah.
They have their phone numbers. We can call
So
them.
it was a diverse. It was a diverse group of people, mostly farmers, hippies, all kinds. Very few university people. And I think that the main idea was to kind of get to know each other, but also I think we all share the vision of a different agriculture from the capitalist monoculture, agrochemical, soaked, cheap labor agriculture that was dominating California landscape, which still does today. And we were thinking of something that would be totally different to this agriculture that was promoted by agribusiness, global markets, more localized production, more diversified production. And obviously, at that time, organic was kind of the main focus of the alternative kind of mode of production. And not precisely in that conference, but groups that went to that conference started being concerned about not duplicating the ills of industrial agriculture and organic. So at some point we were discussing, I remember there was a very important rural sociologist from Davis, I don't remember his name, Fujimoto.
Isao Fujimoto?
Yeah. For example, he and others were discussing issues about why don't we, in addition to the practices and the input regulation in the certification process, we need to introduce social standards, labor issues. Other people were talking about why don't we limit the size of farms? Instead of, if you have 1,000 acres, well, you can certify 100 acres. Why was that discussion going on? Because it was being predicted that if there were no limits, then corporatization of agriculture would happen. And obviously, Judy Gathman in her book describes very well in Organic, what is the name, American Dreams? Agrarian Dreams, it talks about the story. And, today, I mean, the vision that we had at that time, I think, is not matched with the reality of today, where 3% of the largest organic farmers control 70% of the market share of organics. And most of the small farmers, the original pioneers, were marginalized in many ways, and they had to be pushed to other markets that tailor high-income people, because actually organic produce doesn't go to the masses. There's no democratization of the food system. If you go to the Berkeley market, you're going to see very few minorities buying there. Yeah. And this is the reality. With the CSA, it's the same thing. So I think that there were discussions at that time in which these issues were being discussed. I think is important. And it's important that we discuss them today also, because the direction in which agriculture is going now, it's also important that we raise these issues, these discussions about social justice and about other issues that are important.
So Drew, you weren't at the first EcoFarm, but I think you were engaged by the time of the second EcoFarm, right? So.
This is my 44th. I missed one when I was in labor. I'm sorry.
I thought you missed them before when you were pulling lambs out of your use. But anyhow, you must have got here late. So the mission that was embraced by the early EcoFarms, how much of it do you think we've accomplished, and what areas may we have fallen short? What's your perspective on that?
I just want to just relate a little story about the first conference that I attended. Was in Occidental at the YMCA camp. I don't know if any of you were here there, but it was maybe 200 people. That was the one after this. Not in La Honda, at the YMCA in Occidental.
Okay.
And it was a group of about 200 people, very, very passionate, very dedicated people that have, many of whom have gone on to become farmers of 40 years. What I remember so vividly is there was a wonderful farmer named Pat McAravey, who's since passed on, and he lost the use of his arms in polio, from a polio incident. And he was so passionate about organic agriculture, and he took off his hat with his feet and said, we need to pass the hat around so that we can make sure that this conference happens every year. Mm-hmm. And here we are 44 years later. And to me, that is an accomplishment that we cannot forget. We are still here. We are still a community. We are working so hard to bring people together. And our mission at that point was really about sharing information. It was farmers talking to farmers, nonprofit ag groups talking to nonprofits. How can we help each other? We did not know what we were doing. Paul and I, when we started Full Belly Farm in 1984, we had a book out. Like, how are we going to prune these trees, and how are we going to keep, insect pests away? And, it was just so much information sharing between farmer and farmer. And because there was absolutely no support from the university, I went to UC Davis and studied plant science and entomology. When I started to get involved in agriculture at the university, 3 of my professors made me come into a special meeting and said, "We don't want you to get involved with these voodoo agriculturalists." This was the head of the Land, Air, and Water Resources director at UC Davis brought me in and did not want me to get involved with Amigo Bob, particularly. And we started a class called Alternatives in Agriculture. And that was one of the first classes at any university here in California that talked about organic agriculture. So I feel like in some ways, our mission is still happening, and I'm so grateful that you are all here. I have been on the board of directors for 44 years of EcoFarm, and that's just stick-to-itiveness, I guess. I'm kind of boring, but boy, I am so glad we're all here. Yeah.
Canuck, when did you first come? What year did you first come to EcoFarm, and what drew you here? What were you seeking, and what did you find? And what do you take away energy or information from this?
I was similar to you. I was looking for help, not really help, but more other people. Put it that way, because so me, I started out in 2008, and I think what I hear, a common thread is, I always say this, is that discontent is the mother of all progress. And so it sounds like there was a group of people that were not liking what was going on in the situation with farming at the time. And so I had that same thing happen in 2008 when, of course, we had the crash. I'm an IT professional by trade. And so I'm sitting in my cubicle doing my time there. And I'm wondering, okay, everything closes down. I have all this computer knowledge, but then, of course, with no electricity, then I'm pretty much useless. For those people that have seen the movie Leave the World Behind, anybody seen that movie? Okay, hopefully you've seen it. But if you have, I was that guy with the cell phone that was useless without the cell phone in 2008. And so I was like, that's where I started getting into it. Of course, I talked a little bit with Sean here. I used to take my children to the school that they had there. So there was this whole idea of me looking around, because in my community, it wasn't something that was happening. So first time I came to EcoFarm, I think it was maybe 10 or 11, somewhere around there. And it was really to find other people that were growing food, because it just wasn't something that I could just find in my own community. And that's what brought me here. And since I've been here, I've met a lot of people, and it's helped me to grow, because, we've gone from urban farming to now we have some acreage that we're able to do sheep, goats, chicken, and all those different types of things. So that's what it was for me, is to find people that could help take us to the next level, because it just wasn't something I could find where I lived.
So Sarah, you're not just a farmer in Utah, you're quite an activist, and I'd like you to share some of that with us. But I'd also like to ask you, what drew you to EcoFarm, and when did you first come, and what were you looking for, and what did you find?
I love sitting next to this woman because it was Andrew from Full Belly. I was at a heirloom expo. It was the first one that Baker Creek Seeds put on in Petaluma, and they had a booth at the farmers market there, which was really great because they drove all that way to have a booth at a farmers market. I don't think they made any money, but he gave me this thing and he said, "You need to go to EcoFarm. You really need to go." And I was 17. And there was no way I had any money to go. Our family, we had been farming for a year, as that was our second year, that it was our sole source of income, our family. And I was like, I don't have money for education or things like that. But I realized that community was really important. So I think I got the one-day scholarship. We slept in our car. We brought our own food.
That's illegal.
We slept somewhere that was semi-legal. But we brought our own food. And there wasn't a community where we were yet. And so I remember coming here and meeting all of these amazing elders and seeing these people who had been in this movement forever. And it really has changed the way that I farm, and it has changed our state in a lot of ways by coming to this conference. So there is a ripple effect that's happening not just in California, but it's going way beyond. So, and going to the activists, in education. So because of EcoFarm, I went to this conference, and then my mom's like, we've got to go to a conference in Utah. And so I went to the only farming conference that was in Utah. I was the only woman there. I was also the only kid there, basically, because I was 17. The conference.
All old codgers, were they?
Yeah. The conference, I think, was it was really cheap. It was $70. It was on a college campus. It was all conventional. The keynote during lunch. Well, there was nothing I would eat. I remember going there, and I was like, the meals were included for $70. And I remember there being instant mashed potatoes and gravy that was instant, and meat that I don't even know where it came from. And there wasn't even a salad, because I'm like, at least I can eat the lettuce, and it was Jell-O. So there was no salad. And I remember the keynote was a person giving the stats on what the highs and the lows were for hay and corn and soy, the commodities. And I was like, if this is our farming conference in Utah, we're in trouble. This is it. So it took a few years, but I convinced my mom that we need to put on a conference in Utah. And that also brought me into finding the people, because there was no one speaking for these people in our state. And that's why I was like, we need to have a voice.
So you just put on your conference a couple weeks ago, right?
Yes, we did.
So how many people attended your conference now?
Our conference is still tiny. We're still growing. We're where you are, 40 years ago. But we're at around 300 people. So
that's pretty good.
Which is good. Yeah.
So Miguel, most of your colleagues at the University of California in the 1980s, they thought we were idiots. And it was dangerous to associate with people like us. I mean, if you wanted to continue your career as a professor at the University of California, and most of our neighbors, thought we were whack jobs, and really didn't want to associate. Some of them harassed the hell out of us for the kind of stuff we were doing on our farms. How did you navigate the university, that kind of an atmosphere as a professor of agroecology, which I'm sure was a pretty dangerous word back in them times?
Mm-hmm. Well, fortunately, my colleagues in the group that I worked with were biocontrol people that understood that a different approach to agriculture based on agroecological principles was something that was compatible with what they were doing. So from my group, I got support and I got inspiration. And I have a lot of respect for these people: Robert Vandenbosch, Ken Hagen, Don Dalston, Carl Hafaker, many of them, my mentors. The administration, the other departments, was a different story. And so obviously, I suffered not direct persecution, but harassment in different ways. Obstruction of projects, not being given the promotions that I deserved, but I played the game. One of the things that you do in the university is that you have to play the game. So publish or perish. So I did a lot of writing, so they couldn't have any arguments against that. I had research, I had teaching courses with students. I taught agroforestry, urban agriculture, agroecology. So I think that I was able to survive, but given the support of my colleagues, and then at the end you end up coexistent with the system. You know, they don't bother you, you don't bother them, and they were kind of happy because these are things that happened to me when I just came here in California. I remember vividly, there was, I don't know if they exist anymore, it was called the Association of Applied Insect Ecologists. Oh, yeah. And they invited me when I arrived because I took the job of Robert Vandenbosch. Robert Vandenbosch was a professor that cut the pesticide use in cotton from 20 to 0. Okay, so he was not very well welcomed by the chemical industry.
He wrote a very important book. Tell him what the name of the book was, because if you haven't read it, you should.
The Pesticide Conspiracy.
The Pesticide Treadmill, yeah.
But what happened was that they invited me, and I thought I said, wow, California Applied Insect Ecologists, what a progressive group. But it was a bunch of, chemical guys, mostly pesticide control advisors, but very much into chemicals. I know there are here PCAs that are much more open-minded than that. And when they asked me, what are you going to do? They were kind of wondering. They invited me to a lunch, and they said, are you going to work in cotton? No, I said, I'm going to keep working with the small farmers down in Latin America. Oh, great. Fantastic. Fantastic, yeah. Do you need any support, I think they were kind of making sure that I wasn't going to work in cotton, that I was going to follow in the steps of Vandenbosch, which were big shoes to fill anyway. So I think the university also, the administration was kind of happy that you're going to go down there with those small farmers in Colombia and Brazil. Okay, fantastic, go.
So the icy reception that we received at universities began to thaw after about 25 years, 30 years. And just as a measure of the relationships we have with university people now, those who teach or work or instruct at universities, can you raise your hands out here in the audience? So we have a lot of friends and a lot of good collaborators at universities now, and so we much appreciate that. But it was slow coming, but we really enjoy that now. Drew, Full Belly Farm is pretty unique in that you have brought in as partners 3 of your and Paul's adult children are part of your farm. Many of us have not had that privilege or that problem. And I would imagine that gives you both hope for the future, but some anxiety as well, because you have to make your concern work for another generation. What are your and Paul's thoughts as parents? And you also had, 2 other partners in your farming, Andrew and Judith. Judith is now retired, but you created a lot of community at Full Belly, and you shared it with many, many people. But how is that working, bringing children into the business?
Oh, it's a lifesaver, trust me. We're getting old, I guess, and having that new energy and that new blood and new ideas, it makes me so optimistic and so hopeful. Having our kids join us, 3 of the 4, and actually the 4th worked with us for 10 years and has since gone on to become a public school teacher. But 2 of the boys, and now Hannah, she's here in the audience, are working with us, and they all work full-time plus, and we're structured as a corporation, so they're all now shareholders in the farm business. That whole issue of sustainability and how we pass on to the next generation is just so tragic, and we need to really have answers to that, thinking outside the box, new paradigms of land ownership, land tenureship, and we're no longer a country that can be a family farm. It just doesn't work. That is, it's kind of an antiquated vision. We need to have, outside people become partners. Judith and Andrew we would never be where we are without them as part of our farm structure. So I just am hoping that this whole notion of passing farms on to the next generations is gonna be successful. I know that T&D Willie, their farm was one of the most amazing farms as I was a young farmer growing up, and there wasn't someone to take it on. And that was a label that was well respected, and everyone just really revered their produce. And so we really have to connect this generation to the ones that are the elders and ready to pass it on.
So you had to create new kinds of enterprises on your farm in order to accommodate.
Yeah, I mean, partly our kids are full of ideas, so we've branched out into a lot of event organization now. We do farm dinners and our Hose Down Harvest Festival, but some of the things that our kids do on the farm are taking over things that we have done in the past, but a lot of them are new, and so sort of expanding that idea of what you can and can't produce on a farm with that new energy is really helpful.
So flowers are a big enterprise that your daughter Hannah has taken over.
Well,
and you'll have to go visit her booth in the tent because she just published a book about her and her mom's history in the flower business.
Yeah.
There's a lot of young women
Expo
in this
10.
area too that are rebirthing the commercial flower business.
Yeah.
That used to be, there used to be a lot of Japanese American folks in this area and other parts of California that did commercial flowers, but then your friends down in Colombia took over the whole business.
So the
Miguel,
amazing thing is
but you guys are reviving it and doing very well with it. Yeah.
There, Hannah, correct me if I'm wrong, but there are #1 or #2 crop on our farm. And I think one of the things that's so exciting about flowers, how many of you are flower growers or part flower growers in this crowd? It's an amazing thing. And what's so exciting is we're not talking about just food anymore. We've expanded that conversation beyond just food and what we ingest, but it's also what we give to each other, what we give as presents. And, we need to talk about our fiber, and we need to talk about all of the things that can be produced organically. So I'm really excited about expanding that whole conversation.
So tell us about your South Oak Park community in Sacramento. That's where you farm, actually, in an urban area. Well, and what kind of engagement are you trying to create with your community there? And describe the community too.
Yeah, so we actually have 2 places. We're in South Oak Park, Sacramento, and then we're also in the Shenandoah Valley too as well. But I'll talk a little bit about South Oak Park. So, for us, it's a little bit different. Being a black farmer, of course, the history of connection to land is much different. So for the last, I'm 4th generation here, so pretty much 3 generations, most of my family was suffering from the oppressive acts of, slavery and after that. So when you think about land and you think about connection and you think about South Oak Park is a neighborhood that is called a food desert. We say more about food apartheid because it's a red line community that has been made the way that it is by the people who, do urban planning and what have you. They ran at some point, there was a thriving business area with black businesses, and then of course, they decided to put what are those things called, a freeway through there. And then they do this thing called eminent domain and take everybody's land. So when you think about our community was suffering from that. And so as a result, we have what you call corner stores. In our neighborhood, we may have 4, 5, 6 corner stores. No fresh fruits, no vegetables and things of that nature. And then of course, when I then go around to people and say, hey, let's start to grow our own food, especially the young people, well, the picture that they have in their mind of agriculture is whips, cotton, and hard labor. So it's very hard to show them what agriculture can be because that's the image that they have. So what we did is we started on a campaign of education to really start to show not what we've seen, but let's take it back a little bit further. When you start to think about the people that were brought here, there probably wouldn't be a whole bunch of rice over in the East Coast if it wasn't for, the people that were brought here and their ability to grow rice. If you know about okra, you're probably familiar with that crop, but it came here in the hair of those enslaved people that were on ships. So many of the things that, we need to know about why growing food is so important, we don't have. And then on top of that, there's no connection to the land because, when you were saying family farms don't work, I would throw that back at you and just say, family is not working like it used to. And if you start to do your research, 1970, Richard Nixon, there was what was the name of that committee? The Committee of Population Control and the American Future. They gave $1 billion to the media to start to put out images to change what family was. So my parents, they come from, 12, 13 people on one side and then 12 and 13 on the other. But then at some point, as we start to get to 2025, what are we at? 1.2 children, those types of things. My children don't work in the farm right now. Why? Because they went to public school. Do you think they got taught about agriculture or anything about growing food in the future? They did not. So there's a lot of things that have to take place when you start to talk about the activism that we're doing in South Oak Park. Now, but let's talk about a story real quick. Let's talk about the businessman and the fisherman real quick. If you've ever heard this story before, I probably told it several times, but I'm going to say it again. So you think about there's this businessman, billion-dollar businessman, he goes on vacation to, some place, let's say it's in South America somewhere. And so while he's there, he sees this guy fishing. Right? And this guy's fishing, and he's pulling these fish out of the water, right? And he's like, wow, this guy's just pulling stuff out of the water. So he walks up to him and says, hey, what are you doing? He's like, I'm fishing, I'm taking care of my family, doing what I need to do. I'm going to take these fish. I'll spend the day out there fishing, and then after I'm done, we're going to go home and we're going to cook them. By the way, here's a couple of fish. Why don't you take them? So the businessman takes the fish to his family. They cook them. They're the best fish that he's ever had. So he sees the guy again the next day, and he's like, man, you're fishing. He said, these are great fish. Have you ever thought about us selling them? He's like, sell them? Why? We just catch them and then we eat them. The moral of the story is that businessman eventually says, well, maybe you should get some boats so you can catch more fish, so you can turn this into a big business and you can make millions and millions of dollars. And he says, well, why would I want to do that? And he said, so that maybe then you can go on vacation and fish with your children and fish with your family. And he's like, but I'm already doing that right now, right? So the idea is, as we talk about the future, is how do we balance that? Because agriculture and farming are two different things. Farming is the business of agriculture. Agriculture is just growing food and doing things on the earth. And anybody that's a farmer, I don't remember myself really getting into it like I want to make a whole bunch of money. It was just the beauty of being able to grow something and see something grow. But then all of a sudden, when you put the farming aspect on it, that's where the kind of the disconnect comes in.
Sarah, your farm is called Red Acre Farm. It sounds like a communist collective. What the hell goes on there?
What the hell goes on there? That's a good question. So I was born in California, and there's this beautiful like soil here, and it's dark. And when I moved to Utah, I walked out, and we had red clay. And so I looked at my mom and I was like, where's the soil? What happened? What are we doing? So it's named after the dirt in Utah. I'm not going to say soil, it's dirt. And then also my grandpa, his nickname is Red Right. So it's kind of going back to the one who was raised on a farm. But we have a full diet CSA. And we grow, our climate is, we're at 5,900 feet. We have a 60 to 90 day growing season, but we do grow year round. And we supply to our community, and we do year round. Our shareholders sign up at the beginning of the year, and then they get food year round from us. So we don't have, X amount of weeks, they get 52 weeks out of the year.
So how do you grow year-round if you got a 90-day growing season?
That is a good question. There's this man named Elliot Coleman who wrote this book called The Winter Harvest Handbook.
He used to hang around here.
Yeah, he used to hang around here. His daughter's here, which is really exciting. This is her first time at EcoFarm, which is really exciting.
Oh, welcome.
Anyway, I read his book and was inspired to try growing year-round, and it worked. So we can't grow everything, but we definitely, when we left, it was, in the morning, it was, a balmy 15 degrees, but we can grow enough food to feed. We are on a 2-acre farm, but we feed about, 40 people year-round off of that farm, and that's milk, eggs, veggies, and then we get meat. We used to raise more meat there, but meat and grain from a bigger farmer.
So are you able to grow in the winter in those tunnels without burning a lot of fossil fuel?
We actually don't heat anything. So we have one little seedling room that's heated to 40 degrees, nothing else is heated.
So how do you, I'm intrigued. I'm going to Utah. Is the land cheap there? But, so
the land used to
tell
be
us
cheap.
a little bit of something about Elliot's all-season, because he does that in Maine.
He does
which
it in
would be a
Maine.
horrible place to be in the wintertime.
Yeah. So I figured if he could do it in Maine, we could do it in Utah. We were the first really farm to go year-round in our state, kind of, which is kind of crazy. Because I've only been farming for about 15 years. But it raises we can grow greens year-round. We have beautiful, lettuce mixes and claytonia and mosh, which we don't grow anymore because it's too tiny. I feel like it doesn't give you enough volume. It doesn't give you enough weight. But it's really amazing how I say in the morning everything is frozen when you walk out, because you guys do get some frost here, and you can see when you get that frost, it's frozen. But then the sun comes out and it all warms up, and it's like a miracle. But when you do have a CSA and you walk out, it is terrifying to think that everything is frozen. And you have all these people's money, and now what am I going to feed them? So the first year was very nerve-wracking, but now it's become a beautiful rhythm. And the thing is, we all eat, and we all eat all year. And so if I'm going to live in that area, we better figure out how we can eat year-round and eat locally and eat sustainably where we are. And so that's how we've been able to do it with our full diet CSA, because they get to pick what they take every week. So we don't have an amount, we don't have a set thing. We harvest what's available for the week, we put it out there, and then they take what they need to feed their family for the week, which is a very beautiful system, because my thing was we're very community driven, we're very educational based, but I really wanted to feed people, and I wanted to make sure that this land was actually feeding people, and it wasn't someone was excited and watched a movie or read a book and signed up for our, CSA, that these people that are buying in really believe in what we're doing, and it's created a community.
Super. Miguel, now that you're retired from the university, you and your wife have established a farm in Colombia. Most of us, when we think, first of all, what kind of crops come from Colombia, they would be illegal. And so what do you farm there? And what kind of farm do you do in Colombia?
But before I answer that question,
You'll have to excuse the insult.
No, one of the reasons that we're in Colombia and we decided to go there instead of other country, we would have gone to Brazil or Chile or any other country, is that there is a political process that is happening in Colombia. For the first time, there's a leftist government, Gustavo Petro, who actually is very open to agroecology, and they actually passed a law, a national law of agroecology in Colombia, pretty much tailored after the law in Brazil. Brazil has a law of agroecology more than 10 years ago. And so I think that that's important to understand because these laws are not created by some politician that becomes illuminated, are the result of social processes, the pressure of social movements that for years and years and years were able to gain strength to actually shape the policy scenario, which is something that I see that is lacking in the United States. I think that we need to, as a movement in California, as a movement in the United States, be open more to what's happening in the rest of the world in agriculture. Because actually, in the rest of the world, they are embracing agroecology as the main path towards food sovereignty, towards social justice, towards biodiversity conservation. And here, sometimes I see the word interchangeably used with organic, regenerative, as if it was the same thing. I think that we need to kind of put our minds together. What are we talking about when we talk about agroecology? What are we talking about when we talk about regenerative agriculture? The one that is being promoted by corporations, which actually are putting farmers to become agents of carbon sequestration to enter into the carbon markets? Or what are we talking about? In agroecology, there is no confusion. Agroecology has a political agenda for social change, for transforming the food systems in a radical way. So that's one of the reasons why we went there, because I see that there is a how you say, a scenario, a momentum in which it was the right time to do this. So we have a small farm where we have, being a professor of agroecology for 40 years at Berkeley, I thought I knew it all, but actually I became very humble because the distance between theory and practice is huge, especially in the tropics. And I was laughing this morning because we had a session on insect pest management and pathogen pest management, and my main pests are monkeys, little bobcats that eat all the chickens,
I think you got hippopotamus down there too, don't you?
And I started with about 45 different fruit tree species. I grow what I call the polyfruit orchards, mixtures of different species of fruit trees. I started with 45 species. Today I narrow it to 12 because climate change took care of the rest. We have huge swings. We get 2 meters is 2,000 millimeters of rain in 1 month, and then you get 6 months of drought, and we have no irrigation. So nature basically is taking care of what is going to be possible. In addition, we do all the practices, for enhancing organic matter content, microbial activity, all the biodiversity of plants and so on. But there are limits to resilience. That's one thing that I've been understanding. You can do, as a farmer, to mitigate climate change, to adapt to climate change, up to a point. After that, there are limits. It just, it doesn't matter how much organic matter you have in your soil. If you had a drought of 9 months, no matter how much organic matter and retention of humidity you have in your soil, the system is going to break down. Right. So this is something that I'm learning. I think that it's very instructive. And now that the farm, it used to be an abandoned pasture, now it's a forest of fruit trees. And we get about 800 visitors per year, students, farmers, NGO people, all kinds of people. And the main idea is to share knowledge and experiences and so on and so on.
Drew, Full Belly Farm is unique in many ways, but one of the most unique things is that you've had a herd of sheep. I think you have 200 sheep, right? Okay. And so you grow vegetables and you graze sheep, and you actually pull off getting food safety certification. I live over here part-time on the Central Coast now, and we have 1,000-acre, 10,000-acre organic farms. They won't even let them use compost for so-called food safety reasons. And how do you guys get away with grazing sheep and getting food safety certification? And why is it important to have animals on your farm?
Well, there's going to be a great workshop tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, so we probably should quit
Just
pretty
give us
soon.
a little preview.
And it's going to be all about integrating animals onto the farm. But yeah, we started raising animals about 40 years ago when we first started the farm. Always been a passion for me as a spinner and a knitter. To have animals on the farm in some form. I've probably attended over 1,000 births, some of my own, some of my grandchildren, but many sheep over the last 40 years. So, you know, there's so many reasons to integrate animals into your farm life. It's, you know, first of all, heart, compassion, empathy for other living beings is a really lovely thing to integrate into the farm. And it has been very tricky. Honestly, it's a subject that we could go into for hours about the food safety. We have passed our food safety certificate for the last 5 years, having 200 sheep. We have meticulous record keeping, and we're very proud of the fact that we have been able to pass the Primus food safety certification for the last 5 or 6 years without any problem. We often take the certifier to places where the animals are not when we do our field walks, just because the sight of them creates such stress for them that it's really not worth it. So we often scoot the sheep to the neighbor land when we know that the certifier is going to be there. But they definitely are very aware that we raise animals on our farm. I really want to shout out to Jan, who was our farm manager for the last 20 years and really helped. She was a smooth talker, so, but please come tomorrow morning because there's some really exciting work at the university. You know, I don't want to be...
Amelie Gaudin is going to join you tomorrow morning, right?
I feel bad saying the whole thing about the voodoo agriculture because we now have people begging us to do research on our farm from the university. So it's kind of come full circle with that relationship, but it's going to be a great workshop tomorrow morning, so please come.
So we've got a little over 15 minutes left. I would really like all four of you to kind of engage each other in a conversation about your visions for the future of this community and our, you know, modern organic movement. I mean, some of us are very discouraged about the corporatization and the co-option of organic by industrial agriculture, and you know, I think the people that are probably doing some of the greatest work and are more hopeful are the people that are doing either urban farming or very small farming. I mean, I see a lot of the younger people that are attracted to very small farms, primarily to feed themselves and a local community. So let's just mix it up here a little bit. Future Crystal ball.
I think we need to reconnect agriculture back to the cosmos. And the reason why I say that is because, there's nothing that happens in nature that's random. And many of the ways that, even when we talk about, like for example, farmers here, how many plant by the moon? Okay, 1, 2, 3. Do we know that the moon does, it affects things on the earth, right, including plants. But of course it doesn't fit schedules, right? So, you can't just plant something whenever you want to. I think that previous to where we are today, that was something that was part of what we call agriculture. And I think it's very, very important because when you think about, organic versus all the different other types of ways, organic is good, but then when you think about actually how our ancestors lived in the land, had animals and everything together, there was all part of the cosmos. Like for example, well, when we started, it probably isn't right now, we had Sirius and we had, Orion right over the top of the building here. And those things are very important when you talk about planting. There were no clocks back then. So how did you know when something was about to happen? Well, you'd look up and you'd know that the stars were going to be this, the moon's here, the phases of the moon. Those were the things that are important. So I think that as we go forward, we're going to have to reconnect agriculture back to the cosmos. And I think that when we do that, we'll then start to mirror what our ancestors were able to do that we're now starting to come back to, through the corporate world or the corporatization of agriculture. It's very, very important, in my opinion.
Great. I think when I sit in my town, we're the only people in our county that grow vegetables for a living. That's their only source of income. So we do have alfalfa and we do have sheep. None of it really gets sold in our area. Most of it gets shipped out. But when I sit in our Farm Bureau meetings, because that is my farming community. I am one of 4 certified organic vegetable farms in our state, if you think about that. So we're definitely in a different world. In our whole state, there's only 30 certified organic farms. So think about that. So we're definitely, but there's a lot of farmland. So you sit in those meetings and you hear these farmers talk about how the only way to farm is by having another job, by, the only thing that my farm ever buys me is my Coke at, the gas station and a chocolate bar in the morning, which I'm like, maybe you shouldn't be drinking or eating that in the morning.
Farmers are always wine bags. When they shut up, they're making money and then they don't talk.
Yeah, exactly. And then, they sit down and they talk to me and it's my sole source of income and I have 2 acres and they have hundreds or thousands of acres. And our average, when you talk those numbers and you look at that, it's really they start listening, which is kind of cool that this generation is starting to talk about those numbers and talk about how you can, sell directly to consumer and how it is working. And, you look at these elders who have been here and fighting, and you guys have been fighting for this fight forever, but and you've, gone to bigger acreage and gotten things in stores and all these things, but these farmers that are starting now, like I'm a first-generation farmer, are starting small again and selling direct to consumer. And I think that's important to, not discount starting on that half acre or quarter acre and starting somewhere, because, you look at where you can end up or where it can be. And sometimes in this movement, we look at these bigger farms and you're like, oh my gosh, but it's like, you just have to start. And getting, these kids or whatever age back in the dirt, remembering where their food comes from, will spark that next generation. And when we do a lot of advocacy, we're up at the Capitol, we're advocating for raw milk and direct to consumer and all of these things to help farms, you know, because I always say when I'm talking, the people who fight us the most are a lot of times farmers who are in big ag, which is crazy. But I'm like, you had the opportunity to be raised on a farm and have that. And if we want the next generation to have that same opportunity, we need to open up these doors to make it possible. And those are the conversations. But as I'm sitting in committees now, I'm talking to representatives and legislators who haven't grown up on farms anymore. Like I often, you know, used to walk up and he's like, I grew up, you know, moving pipe. I grew up milking cows. I grew up, but now I'm walking up to them and now it's their grandparents. And they didn't remember going on this summer, you know, moving pipe or baling hay or milking an animal. And so we're losing that in our people who are running this country, in our, you know, local, state, you know, and so to keep that ag, to keep it so kids can keep on saying who are in these places that are making these decisions and voting, saying, yeah, I remember going to a farm, you know, even though it was maybe once during the summer to a farm camp or whatever it is, that, you know, I remember that agriculture piece and remember being in that soil. And that's what we need to do. And a lot of these small farms are more able to welcome the community. Like I have, you know, hundreds of people on my farm and get to welcome the community because we are smaller and we don't have equipment and we don't have to worry about those things. And that is how we can keep the next generation engaged and how we can keep this alive and how we can keep their kids, you know, because it's like maybe the people who are in the, you know, in power or wherever they are, maybe their kids can come back and be like, hey, Dad, I went to this really cool thing, or Mom, like, you know, that we milked a goat today on a farm. And that is something that we need to make sure that even though no matter what size or what piece or wherever you are in the puzzle, that you are making a difference. That it doesn't matter if you're starting with a pot on your backyard and you're talking about organic produce, that little things create the big movement. And that's why we're all here, is because of these farmers who started small.
Future, Drew or Miguel?
Well, I just wanted to reflect on the fact that in my opinion, the corporatization of organic agriculture did little to bolster diversified, ecologically, socially just agriculture as it was envisioned by the adherents, the early adherents of organic farming in 1981 and others in other parts. And as long as the discourses of regenerative agriculture or organic are co-opted by big agribusiness, there will never be a chance to transform the food systems in the direction of being more socially just, resilient, etc. And I think that it is important that a group like this embraces an agenda based on agroecology to face, because it's the only path to face the polycrisis. We're in a polycrisis. We're facing climate change. We're facing pandemics. We're facing conflicts that are disrupting the distribution of food worldwide, raising the cost of inputs and so on and so on. And we need to create a change and distance ourselves from the corporate agenda. The digital, the biotechnological, the robotics, the artificial intelligence. Some people might argue, well, there are some good tools there. Yeah, you can use the tools, but we need to keep a distance and recreate an agriculture that is based on nature, that also capitalizes on the local knowledge, the traditional knowledge, the ancestral knowledge, but also the local knowledge of farmers. And that's the only way that we're going to be able to create a path for the future, because otherwise, as somebody was ending, I think Hans this morning was ending his talk saying that you cannot change the system with the same mentality that created it.
Can't use the master's tools to dismantle the master's house.
He was quoting Albert Einstein.
Einstein.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Hans is a smart guy, but he's not Albert Einstein. Yeah. Drew.
Oh gosh, I vacillate between total despair and total optimism. When I have this woman beside me, I'm so optimistic. This morning, I thought what I wanted to tell you is how I wanted to be remembered changed radically this morning. I said, what I want to be remembered for is I want to be known as a grandmother of 12, a woman farmer who stood at the gate of her farm and refused to let any ice people onto my farm. And I'm kind of really tired of being nice, and I'm really tired of being, kind, and I don't know, I'm ready to be more radical than ever. But I also wanted to just relate this fun kind of story, because I do think we also need to keep a sense of humor and love and laughter in all that we do. And I'm a really nervous speaker. I've been thinking about this talk for the last month. Okay, looking ahead, looking behind. I'm driving a tractor the other day, looking ahead, looking behind, and just puzzling, what is it that this group really wants to hear? And I have this beautiful Jersey milk cow. Her name is Eclair, and she was 9 months pregnant, and a few weeks ago I went out and she was in labor. And I'm so grateful and blessed to be part of labor, and it's a miracle, the whole birth process. But I decided to watch her have her calf. They don't really need my help, but I just love watching the miracle of birth. And if you've ever seen a cow or a sheep, the canals back there are all very close. The poop canal and the vagina canal, they're all, within inches of each other, and they lay on their side to give birth. And she was laying down, and I waited and watched, and it's always just so touching to watch them go through it, especially having given birth. And all of a sudden, it's messy. There's poo, and there's blood, and there's urine, and you're kind of just sitting there watching it. And then, the little hooves come out, and a little nose comes out, and pretty soon a head comes out. The head shakes off, and I just had this epiphany. I am looking at a head while I'm looking at a behind. That's my story. Let's stay really optimistic together, okay?
Do you do stand-up comedy as a sideline?
Anyway, sorry, that wasn't very serious.
For many years, for many of the probably first 20 years of my farming career, for the most part, I had no organic farming neighbors anywhere near me. But Mr. Rogers used to tell us, look for the helpers, and I always found 2 or 3 people in my neighborhood that took me under their wing and taught me things. They weren't organic farmers. They didn't necessarily agree with my approach to farming organically, but they did help me. And so we just got a couple minutes. Does anybody have a good story about a mentor in their neighborhood that reached out to them and taught them something, even though you may disagree on other things?
I do.
Sarah.
I do. Not really, but so everyone around me grows alfalfa. A lot of it gets shipped to China. We can have that whole discussion later. But one of the largest alfalfa farmers in our area, the largest, not one of the largest, his tractor is literally the size of my whole farm, his main tractor. I'm like, wow, we can just go right through. And they all call me gardeners. I'm a gardener in my area. But those old timers, when I first started, he came out with his tractor and tilled up my field. Literally took 1 like plow through. Just one pass and he was done. He had our sheep farmer come out and dump all this manure. This was 15 years, like I didn't know anyone, I didn't know anything. I didn't know really the seasons, like I planted completely wrong. And they came and dumped all this beautiful manure. They helped me straighten my road. Like they got me started, which was really beautiful. Because they don't believe, like, you know, afterwards, like we have discussions and they think I'm trying to destroy their industry, you know, like I'm undermining what they're doing. But at the same time, when it comes down to it, we're all farmers and we're all just trying, like, it's not what we do, it's who we are. And that's what the truth is when it comes down to it, it's who we are, it's in our blood. You know, it's like that beauty, and I think that's the beauty of community.
Canuck, do you have any mentors? I'll bet you found some hidden farmers in your neighborhood that knew how to do things that you didn't know how to do, even in urban Sacramento, I'll bet.
Absolutely. So usually it'll be an older woman that, you know, came out here from way back when, and they'll come to the farm. And then we had one lady, she kind of broke down crying because she was like, this reminds me of when I was a child. Because of course, when you come out here, most of my ancestors, when they came out of here, they left land and left farms. So those are the types of mentors that we had. But then also I have another mentor. His name is Harold Hoven. I don't know if you may have heard of him. But from Rudolph Steiner College. So when like I said, about 20 years ago, I took my sons out there because I was trying to find out what I was going to do next. And so he's going to be mentoring me. He has mentored me, and he's going to be mentoring me on creating a self-contained farm organism in our place in Shenandoah Valley. So, you know, those are the types of mentors that we have. But once again, the greatest mentor is the land, the animals. They teach you so much. In fact, I was sitting out in the creek before I came out here, and it's like, you know, there's so much to learn from the land, being observant to the land. It will tell you what you need to know if you pay attention. We always say that the answers are in the soil, if we would just listen. So when you sit still and you listen to the land, it will tell you what it needs to get done. You can watch it. So I think that that's the greatest mentor.
So look for the helpers and make friends with farmers in your neighborhood, even if you don't think you agree with them or vote for the same person that they might. They're connected to the soil. And we're all connected to the soil. And I like to say that everyone who eats is a farmer. And
Whether you know it or not.
I want to thank our participants up here, even the ones that were scared witless for a couple of weeks thinking about them. And They've all promised to come back 45 years from now and do it again. It's tea party time, so join the tea party in the back of the hall. Okay, good night, thank you.